The Fastness had been built in a place where nothing wanted to live, which was, its founders felt, the entire point. It hung at a gravitational null between three suns that did not like each other, a lump of welded rock, an old warship spine with no reason to exist except stubbornness. Once a cycle, the Concordance of Severe Origins convened in its lower chamber, and the hardest species in the surveyed volume sat down together to talk about how hard they were. They did not put it that way in the charter. The charter said the Concordance existed to catalog and preserve the knowledge of worlds that had proven lethal to their own children, and to represent those who had survived them. That was a beautiful sentence, and everyone at the table knew what it meant, which was, "We are what a cruel world made. Nobody else gets to say that. There is a list and you are not on it." Warden Thesek Varrason of Karad had chaired the Concordance for 11 cycles, and had, in that time, developed a private theory that the entire institution was a very old and very dignified way of not being lonely. He kept the theory to himself. His people had evolved on a world of 2.9 gravities under an ammonia sky that rained something close to lie, and they had grown a carapace of layered silicate to deal with it. And the same instinct that had grown the carapace kept his opinions on the inside where they belonged. He arrived early, as always, and stood in the empty chamber while the lamps warmed. It was a shallow bowl of black stone with seats cut to fit bodies that did not agree about anything, including what a body was. Above them all ran the founder's frieze, 6 figures carved into the stone, one of whom had been dead as a species for 900 years and was carved anyway, because the Concordance did not remove people from the list. Underclerk Vesith came in behind him, arms full of slate, and made the small buzzing noise her people made when they were about to say something a warden would not like. "Warden, the hearing docket." "How many?" "1 item, the appeal." Warden saw 3, designation Earth. "Ah." Thesek let a long breath out through the vents along his flank. "The garden." Vesith's antennae flattened, which was as close as a preen came to a wince. Vesith was not a Deathworlder. Her homeworld's most dangerous animal was a bird that occasionally landed on you. The Concordance employed preen as clerks precisely because no preen could be accused of taking a side. They were structurally incapable of pride. Their hazard index of origin remains 2.1, Warden. The threshold for admission is 7. They have appended 1,100 pages. "Of what?" "Argument." Warden. 2.1, said Thesek. "Do you know what 2.1 means under clerk? It means temperate. It means liquid water at the surface, standing there uncovered as though nobody were coming for it. It means a breathable free oxygen atmosphere and a magnetosphere and a single stable moon holding the axis still like a hand on a child's shoulder. It means the worst weather on the planet is wind." He made a sound like gravel settling. 2.1 is a nursery. My world scores 8.4 and I consider it soft, because my grandmother's valley scored 9 and she never let me forget it. "Shall I have the rejection engrossed?" Warden. "It engrossed itself the moment the number came in, but we will hear them. That is also in the charter. 9 words of it are mine." The others came in over the next hour. Registrar Oslik Noon of the Velshai arrived first, because Oslik arrived first to anything with data in it. She came up the lattice in a ripple of too many joints, and settled with 3 recording stalks already deployed, aimed at nothing yet. She had spent 240 years cataloging what every known species was made of, what it could take in, and what it turned that into, and she was the only person in the volume who found the Concordance's archives insufficiently detailed. Delegate Palm of the Ub was poured into his pit by 2 attendants and a pump. Matriarch Ussa of the Thren came in without anyone noticing, which was the Thren's whole approach to arrival, and was simply present on her ledge, coiled, dark, still, her eyes doing the thing Thren eyes did, which was not blink. Grand Marshal Duru van Kestor came in last and loudly. He was 400 kilos of muscle and plate, and did not so much enter a room as apply himself to it. Kesh had evolved chasing one animal across a continent of volcanic glass and had never really stopped. With nothing to chase, Kesh chased conversations. "One item," he said before he had folded himself onto the slab, "and it is the garden again. Warden, I will save the chamber a day." "No." "Noted." 2.1. Duruvan showed his back teeth, which was laughter. "My hatchling nest scored 6.8 and we lost 4 of 11, and I would not describe my childhood as challenging. What did their world do to them, Warden?" "Rain." "Occasionally," said Ocelot without looking up. "Their world is very wet. It is one of the wettest surfaces we have surveyed. It is also, and I want this in the record because nobody reads my annexes, extraordinarily rich. 2.1 is not merely safe. It is generous. Sol 3 has more distinct multicellular lineages than the next 4 survey worlds combined." "Then they had it easy, and they were fat about it." "That is one reading," said Ocelot. "Is there another?" Her stalks rotated a fraction. "There is always another." The humans were shown in at the third bell. There were 3 of them, which Thesek noted, because applicant delegations usually numbered a dozen and were mostly there to be impressive. The first was old, upright, in a plain gray coat with no ornament at all, Ambassador Idu Bassi, carrying nothing. The second was a pale woman with a hard mouth and a slate under her arm, Attaché Marta Halloran. The third was a girl. Thesek did not at first register her as anything but an oddity of staffing. She was small and young. She wore a coverall 2 sizes too large with the sleeves rolled to the elbow and a case slung across her body, and her hair was tied up in a way that suggested she had done it herself in a corridor. She came through the doorway last, stopped, looked up at the Founder's frieze, and stayed there looking up at it for 4 full seconds while the 2 adults walked on without her. She was, Thesek thought, looking at the dead one, the empty carving. Then she jogged 3 steps and caught up and stood behind the ambassador's left shoulder with her hands folded, and became furniture. "The Concordance of Severe Origins," said Vesith from the well, "recognizes the delegation of Sol 3 in the matter of admission, 4th appeal. The chamber notes the hazard index of origin at 2.1, uncontested." "Contested," said Ambassador Bassi. "You cannot contest a number," said Duruvan. "I can contest what it measures." Bassi's voice was pleasant and unhurried and had the specific weight of a man who had said the same thing 3 times before to no effect and had decided to say it a 4th time anyway. "The index measures hostility of environment, gravity, radiation, thermal range, atmospheric toxicity, predation pressure, and 11 other categories, and it measures them at a single point, the point at which the species emerged. It is a photograph. We are asking the chamber to consider a film." "Poetic," said Duruvan. "Cheap," Bassi agreed, "but accurate." And then it went on, and Thesek let it, and it was, as he had known it would be, hopeless. Bassi was good, that was the sad part. He argued that the index measured an accident, that no species chose its birth conditions, and that admitting on birth conditions alone was the same as admiring a stone for being heavy. He asked the chamber to be interested in a species that had gone to lethal worlds on purpose. Duruvan asked how many. Bassi said all of them. Duruvan asked all of what? Bassi said all of the lethal places on our own planet, and Duruvan laughed so hard the slab creaked. Because 2.1, Ambassador 2.1, there are no lethal places on a 2.1 world. That is what 2.1 means. Which was, Thesek thought later, the exact moment the whole thing turned and none of them heard it. It went 11 hours. Session lengths had been set, generations ago, by the Kesh, who did not sit down and had been kept out of tradition, which is the word institutions use for a wound they have gotten used to. Ocelot took 9,000 words of notes. Ussa said nothing at all. At the 8th hour, Thesek noticed that the humans had not asked for a recess. At the 9th, he noticed it again. At the 10th, he called one himself and told himself it was for Palm. The commissary of the Fastness was the station's great engineering achievement and its great humiliation. It could feed perhaps 9 species, and it did so by keeping them absolutely and permanently apart. 9 kitchens, 9 sealed lines, 9 sets of tools that never crossed. There was a Kesh kitchen that prepared one animal, because Kesh ate one animal, the same animal their ancestors had run to death on the glass, and would eat nothing else, and had tried in the early years of contact, and had nearly died of it twice. This was normal. It was, in fact, the deep truth of the concordance that nobody bothered to say aloud because it was as obvious as the floor. A Deathworld species is a specialist. You survive a world that is trying to kill you by becoming an answer to it. Armor, venom, speed, a gut tuned like an instrument to one string. Every species in that chamber could eat between 1 and 4 things and would die on the 5th, and they were proud of it, in the way that a key is proud of one lock. Thesek took his hern cake to the warden's alcove and ate it the way he had eaten it for 200 years. Silently, alone, facing a wall, because the sight of another species eating was, to a Karudan, roughly what watching a stranger perform surgery on themselves would be to anyone else. He was on his way back when he passed the neutral gallery and saw the girl. She was sitting on a bench by the long window with a tray on her knees. Halloran was somewhere else. Bassi was somewhere else. The girl was alone, in a station full of things that could kill her, with her legs crossed under her and her back to the door, eating. Thesek stopped walking. He was not sure why. The 3 sons did nothing interesting outside. The girl sat with her spine loose and her shoulders down and ate, and she was not watching the door, and she was not watching anything at all except, occasionally, the tray, and she was making a small sound to herself that Thesek's translator eventually identified as humming. Oslik arrived beside him without noise, the way Velshai did. "Warden, you are staring." "I am observing." "You are staring at a juvenile eating," said Oslik. "I say this with no judgment. I have been standing here for 6 minutes." Thesek's vent cycled. "What is she doing?" "That is precisely the question I have been failing to answer for 6 minutes." "She is eating." "Yes." "Then what is the question?" Oslik's stalks came around, all 3, and locked on the bench. And for the first time in 11 cycles, Thesek heard something in the Registrar of Bodies' voice that was not the flat, gentle patience of a person reading a list. "Warden, how many kitchens does this station operate?" 9. "How many did she use?" Thesek looked again. The tray was not a station tray. It was her case, opened flat with compartments, and the compartments were full of things that had come from a human ship and had nothing to do with the Fastness. "She brought it with her," he said. "That is standard." "Yes." "Warden, I would like you to do something before you form an opinion, because I have been doing it for 6 minutes, and I no longer trust mine." "What?" "Count." "Count what?" "Count," said Oslik, "the organisms." Thesek turned his whole body, because that was the only way a Karudan turned, and he looked across the gallery at a 17-year-old girl sitting cross-legged with her lunch on her lap, and he began, dutifully, to count. He got to 4 and stopped, because he had assumed he would be counting to 2. Then he started again, and this time he counted properly, and something in the base of his skull, some old part that had survived 2.9 gravities, and a sky that rained lie and 900 million years of being extremely careful, began, very quietly, to stand up. The count went like this. There was a slab of something pale and porous that Thesek's overlay identified as a grain product, which meant a plant, which was 1. There was a substance spread on it, yellow, which the overlay called a lipid emulsion from an animal, which was 2. The animal was not the same animal that produced the pale gray shaved material laid on top, which was 3, and that material was flesh, and it had been smoked, which the overlay noted in passing as though smoking a corpse were a normal thing to do to lunch. 4 was a green leaf. 5 was a red sphere in slices. 6 was a thin ring of something sharp that made his sensors report a sulfur compound and a defensive alkaloid. 7 was in a separate compartment and was pale and firm, and the overlay said, with what Thesek chose to read as reluctance, that it was the milk of a third animal that had been curdled by a bacterium and then aged in a cave. 8 was the bacterium. 9 was in a small jar and had been a plant and was now, according to every sensor Thesek had, in the middle of being eaten by a fungus, and had been for some time, on purpose, in a jar, in a cupboard, in a starship, which the girl had carried across 400 light years, so that she could eat the fungus and the plant at the same time. 10 was a nut, which was a different plant. 11 was salt. Salt was a rock. She is eating a rock, said Thesek. She is seasoning with a rock, said Ocelot. There is a distinction, and I am not certain it improves matters. Registrar. Warden. How many kingdoms? Ocelot's stalks did not move. 4, she said. Animal, plant, fungus, bacterium, plus a mineral, plus a beverage I have not yet had the courage to catalogue. Warden, I have been the Registrar of Bodies for 240 years. I have compiled the dietary annex for every member species of this concordance. Would you like to know the record before today for the number of distinct organisms consumed by a single individual in a single meal? Say it. 3, said Ocelot. It is held by a Thren, and it was an accident, and she was ill for a month. They stood in the doorway like two very large people who had walked in on something private. The girl finished the slab thing, brushed her hands off on her coverall, and reached for the beverage. Ah, said Ocelot, now. What? I ran that one first, Warden, 6 minutes ago, and I have been waiting to see whether I would have to report it. The beverage was black, it steamed. The girl held it in both hands, and blew on it and drank it. It is hot, said Thesek. It is 81 degrees, which is above the denaturing threshold of her own surface proteins, and she is pouring it directly into her body. But Warden, that is not the part. Then what is the part? It contains, said Ocelot, a purine alkaloid. It is a plant's neurotoxin. It is manufactured by the plant specifically to disrupt the nervous systems of small animals that would otherwise eat its seeds. It is, in a meaningful sense, the plant's opinion of being eaten. Ocelot's stalks rotated slowly, all three, tracking the cup up to the girl's mouth. She has extracted the seeds. She has roasted them at 200 degrees until their internal chemistry rearranges. She has ground them to powder. She has forced hot water through the powder under pressure in order to concentrate the toxin, and she is now drinking the concentrate, voluntarily, for pleasure and Warden. This is the 12th hour of her day, and she is drinking it in order to keep working. Thesek said nothing. The plant, said Ocelot, invented a poison to stop being eaten. The humans found the poison and cultivated the plant, and there are, according to their own annex, 1.4 million square kilometers of that plant under human management. They planted it. They planted the thing that poisons them, on 4 continents, and they defend it from insects. Why? Because, said Ocelot, they like how it makes them feel. Duruvan found them there 10 minutes later, which was unfortunate, because Duruvan had never in his life encountered a doorway that 2 people were standing in and elected to leave it alone. What, he said, are we looking at? Lunch, said Thesek. Duruvan looked. His species had a visual system built for tracking a single fleeing animal across a plane of black glass at 40 kilometers an hour, and it took him under a second to resolve the bench, the girl, the tray, and the 11. He stopped showing his back teeth. That is a corpse, he said. Several, said Ocelot. No, Registrar, that is a corpse, and that is a plant, and that is, Duruvan's crest came up. It was not a threat display. It was the other thing, the one Kesh did not have a polite name for. That is milk. That is another animal's milk. That is another animal's milk that has gone off. That is a cheese, said Ocelot. It is deliberate. There is a mold in it, and the mold is also deliberate. Marshall, the mold has a name, and the cave has a name, and the family that owns the cave has a name, and they have been doing it in that cave for 600 years. They rot it. They manage the rot, said Ocelot. It is not the same thing, and I want that in the record. Rot is what happens. This is what they do to rot. Marshall, look at the jar. That plant is being eaten alive by a fungal culture in a controlled brine, and she carried it here, and she is going to eat it, and then she is going to keep the brine, because the brine is how you start the next one. Deruvan stared for a long moment. In my kitchen on this station there is one animal, said Deruvan. One. We tried in the contact years. 41 of us tried, 6 lived. He looked at the bench. And that hatchling is sitting there with 4 kingdoms on her lap humming. She is not a hatchling, said Thesek. The annex says 17, that is adolescent. That is worse. Yes, said Thesek, I had reached that too. They watched. It became, without any of them deciding it, the sort of thing people do not walk away from. The girl took the slab of grain and did something to it that none of them understood for several seconds. She had a small device. She put the slab in the device. The device glowed. The slab came out darker and made a sound when she bit it. Warden, said Ocelot, and her voice had gone strange and flat. She is applying heat to it. She is cooking. Warden, listen to me, because I have been building toward this for 6 minutes and I want to say it correctly. Ocelot's stalks all came down and pointed at the floor, which was what a Velshai did instead of putting her head in her hands. Every species in that chamber digests inside its body. That is what digestion is. It is a thing your body does in the dark with acid and enzymes, and it is the hardest and most expensive thing your body does. My gut is 40% of my mass. Marshall, what is yours? 31, said Deruvan. Warden. 38. Hers, said Ocelot, is under 9. Deruvan's crest twitched. Then she is a weakling. She is not a weakling, she is subcontracting. Ocelot pointed one stalk at the little glowing device. That is a stomach, Marshall. That is an external stomach. Fire is a stomach. She is breaking the food down before it enters her, using heat, using salt, using acid, using time, using a fungus she employs, using a bacterium she farms. And by the time it goes into her body, most of the work is already finished. And so she does not need to carry the machinery. And so the mass and the blood supply and the energy that you and I spend on gut, she spends on something else. On what? Said Deruvan. Ocelot did not answer immediately. Registrar, said Thesek. On brain, said Ocelot. Warden, they made fire a stomach, and they spent the difference on brain, and they did it 2 million years ago, and they have had 2 million years to sit around being bored with the extra. Nobody said anything for a while. Out on the bench, the girl finished the darkened slab and turned her attention to the compartment with the red sphere in it, and Thesek watched her put a slice of it on her tongue, and pause, and make a small satisfied movement of her head, the way a person does when a thing is better than expected, and he found that he had to look away. Deruvan broke first, because Deruvan always broke first. Enough, he said, and walked out into the gallery. Thesek did not stop him. He told himself afterward that this was because a warden does not manage a marshal in public, but the honest reason was that he wanted, very badly, to see what happened. Deruvan crossed the gallery in 9 strides. He was 400 kilos. The deck plating registered him. Halfway across he did the thing Kesh do without deciding to, which is that the crest goes up and the shoulders roll forward and the back teeth show and the whole animal becomes, for a moment, a statement, and the statement is, I have run down faster things than you across worse ground than this, and I am not tired. Every species in the surveyed volume has a response to that statement. The Velshi flatten, the Ub sink, the Thren vanish. The preen famously faint. It is not cowardice, it is arithmetic. The girl looked up. She had a slice of the red sphere halfway to her mouth. She looked up at 400 kilos of apex predator standing over her with its crest up and its teeth out, and her pupils did the thing pupils do, and Thesek's overlay caught the spike in her heart rate, 61 to 94. And then he watched it come back down again over about 4 seconds, and she did not stand up, and she did not go still, and she did not stop chewing. She swallowed. She looked at the crest. She looked at the teeth. She looked briefly at the door, and Thesek understood that she had located it and filed it and dismissed it, and then she looked back up at Duruvan's face and she said, "Hi." Duruvan's crest stayed up. He was, Thesek thought, waiting for the arithmetic. "You're the marshal, right, Kesh?" She wiped her fingers on her coverall. "Sorry, I only got the names off the door plates. I'm not staff for the actual meeting. I'm just here to certify the water." Duruvan said nothing. "Do you want to sit down?" said the girl. "You're doing the thing where you're looming, and I genuinely can't tell if it's on purpose. My gran does that with her hearing aid off." Ossilik made a noise. Duruvan's crest came down 1/2 centimeter and went back up, which for Akesh was an entire internal crisis. "You are not afraid," he said. "I'm a bit afraid," she said. "You're enormous, but you're on the committee, so you're presumably not going to eat me in front of the window because there's paperwork." She shrugged. "And I'm hungry. If I stopped eating every time something big looked at me, I'd never get anything done. Do many things look at you? On the ship, constantly, everyone looks at the food." And then she did it. She reached into the tray, and she took out one of the thin, dark slices of the smoked flesh, and she held it up toward 400 kilos of obligate carnivore who had spent 11 hours that day arguing that her species should be thrown off the list. And she said, in the flat, friendly voice of a 17-year-old offering a colleague a snack, "Do you want one? It's pork. It's probably going to kill you. I wouldn't, but you can smell it." Behind them, on her ledge in the shadow of the doorway, where no one had noticed her arrive, Matriarch Ussa of the Thren spoke for the first time in 11 hours. "Warden," she said, "did you see what she just did?" Thesek had. He had watched a juvenile of a species with no armor, no venom, no claws, and a hazard index of 2.1, look up at an apex predator 4 times her mass, decline to stop eating, and then hand over some of her food. "She fed him," said Ussa. "Yes." "Warden," said Ussa, and her voice was very quiet and very old, "in my lineage we do not share meat. We do not share meat because sharing meat means you have more than you need and you are not worried about tomorrow and you are not worried about the person you are handing it to." The Thren did not blink. The Thren never blinked. "Do you understand what I am telling you? That is not a friendly gesture. There is no such thing as a friendly gesture around food. That is a display." "Of what?" "Of not caring," said Ussa. "She is the only thing in this room that can afford it." The Concordance did not reconvene at the 12th hour. This was unprecedented. Vesith noted it in the record with 3 separate qualifiers and a request for guidance that nobody answered. What happened instead was that Warden Thesek Varasan sent a single line to the Registrar of Bodies, and the Registrar of Bodies, who had been waiting 240 years for someone to ask her a question she could not immediately answer, replied with a document. The line was, "Registrar, the Human Dietary Annex, all of it." The reply was, "Warden, it is 900 pages and I did not write it, they submitted it, and Warden, I have read it 4 times and I do not think they know what it says." They met in the small chamber at the 14th hour, the 5 of them, with no clerks and no record. The Kesh did not sit. The Velshi did not stop moving. The Thren was a coil of dark in the corner that occasionally proved she was there by speaking. "Begin," said Thesek. "I will begin with the number," said Ocelot, "because the number is the whole thing and everything after it is decoration. How many distinct species do the Kesh eat?" "1," said Duruvan. "Thren." "4," said Ussa. "3 honestly. The 4th is ceremonial and half of us are sick after." "Lubby." Palm's tank bubbled. The translator said, 2, and one of them is technically the same one at a different depth. "Karad 3, said Thesek. "Velshai 2, I round up. Now." Ocelot's stalks came up and held there, and Thesek realized she was doing something he had never seen a Velshai do, which was building to a moment. The humans submitted, as required, a list of species consumed. The concordance form has a field for it. The field has space for 6 entries. They attached a separate document. "How many?" said Duruvan. The document is a summary. It says, and I am reading it exactly, "Comprehensive listing is impractical. The following is a survey of major categories." Then it lists 2,000 named plants under cultivation, 400 animals under management, 1,900 species harvested but not managed. Then a category called regional and historical, which it does not enumerate, and which it estimates, and Marshall, I want you to hear the estimate, because they wrote it the way you would write a weather note. "Say it." "Approximately 75,000, said Ocelot. "They estimate that humans, across their history, have eaten approximately 75,000 distinct species of organism, and then there is a footnote. The footnote says, this figure is conservative and excludes fungi, which are poorly catalogued." The small chamber was very quiet. Palm's tank bubbled. "That is not possible," said Duruvan. "That is what I said. So I checked the mechanism, and the mechanism is the frightening part, not the number." Ocelot brought up the first plate. "This is a root. It grows on their world in the warm belt. It is a good root. Dense, it stores well, it grows in soil that will not support anything else. In energetic terms, it is the best thing in 300 kilometers. It is also poisonous. Not mildly. It contains a compound that releases a cyanide analog when the cells are broken. Eat it raw and you have hours." "Then you do not eat it," said Duruvan. "Then you do not eat it," Ocelot agreed. "That is the correct answer. That is the answer every organism on their planet arrived at. That root sat there for millions of years, full of energy, surrounded by starving animals, and nothing touched it because it had one. It had solved the problem of being eaten. It was finished. It was safe forever." Her stalks lowered. "Humans peel it. Then they grate it because the poison is locked in the cells, and grating breaks the cells and lets it start reacting. They are deliberately triggering it. Then they soak it in water for 3 days, and change the water and press it and dry it and heat it. And by the end there is nothing left but the food." "How?" said Ussa from the corner. "That is what I want to talk about. Consider the process. Peel, grate, soak 3 days, change water, press, dry, heat. 7 steps. Get any of them wrong and you are dead or blind. There is no gradient, you cannot get halfway there and feel slightly better. A single individual cannot discover that sequence, because the discovery process kills the discoverer." "Then it cannot be discovered," said Thesek. "It was discovered, and the annex is very casual about how, because to them it is not interesting. It took generations, Warden. It took people trying, and failing, and dying, and other people watching and remembering and trying a different step, and then telling their children, and their children telling their children, and somewhere across an unknown span of time, a sequence of 7 steps assembled itself out of 100 lifetimes, and none of the people who died to find step 4 ever tasted step 7. Duruvan's crest did not move. In Akesh, that was the equivalent of a long silence. "Why?" he said at last. "That is my question, not how. Why, there is other food. You said it yourself, 2,000 plants, 400 animals, so there was other food. They did not need the root. Somebody's mother died on the root, and somebody's son went back to the root the next season with a different idea, and there was other food. Why? Because, said Ocelot, it was there and it was good, and it did not want to be eaten, and they had not finished. Ussa made a sound in the dark. There is more, said Ocelot. Warden, may I do the whole thing? It gets worse, and I would rather do it in one piece than in installments. Do the whole thing, said Thesek. So she did the whole thing, and it took 4 hours, and afterwards Thesek could not remember all of it, only the shape, the way you remember a fall rather than the individual stairs. She did the fermentation section, and explained that humans, upon encountering the universal problem that food goes bad, had not solved it by preventing rot but by choosing which rot, that they had domesticated decay, that there were 400 distinct microorganisms humans deliberately introduced into their food, by name, with lineages, some maintained continuously for centuries in a single kitchen and passed down like a title. That the word for the thing you keep back to start the next batch translated, roughly, as mother. She did the section on the sea, and the fish that is lethal unless a licensed person removes a specific organ with a specific knife, and that this fish remains on menus, and that there is a queue. She did the section on clay. Palm asked her to repeat it. She repeated it. Certain human populations, when their staple carried a toxin they could not fully remove, ate clay with it, because the clay binds the toxin and carries it out, and they had worked this out with no instruments and no theory, and the annex mentioned it in a subclause, as a curiosity, as though it were a local spelling. And then she did the one that broke Duruvan. Marshal, how do the Kesh hunt? You know how the Kesh hunt. I want it said aloud in this room. Duruvan's crest came up slowly, and this time it was not a display, it was closer to a flag. We run it down. The Kurhen is the fastest animal on Kesh. Over 400 meters it is much faster than us. We do not care. We start it and we follow, and it runs and it stops, and we come, and it runs again and it stops sooner, and we come. And by the 11th hour it is standing still and shaking, and we walk up to it. It is not a chase. It is a promise. He showed his teeth. That is what we are. That is what our world made us. 400,000 years of following a faster thing until it stops. There is no other species in this concordance that does that. There is no other species in the volume that does that. Ocelot waited. She waited long enough that Thesek understood, and the understanding arrived in his chest like a stone dropped down a well. Registrar, he said, do not. Warden, they submitted it. It is in their own annex in the physiology section under thermoregulation, and it is 1 paragraph long. Ocelot turned all 3 stalks on the Grand Marshal of Kesh. Marshal, they sweat. They what? They leak water through their entire skin surface and let it evaporate, and the evaporation carries away heat, and it means they can shed heat while they are moving. Every other large land animal on their world overheats and must stop. Humans do not stop. They have less hair than anything their size, and millions of water glands, and a leg tendon that returns energy on every stride like a spring, and they can carry water in a container in their hands, which they are not using for anything else because they walk on 2 legs. Registrar. Marshal on their world before they had tools worth the name, humans hunted by walking after an animal, not running, walking mostly, for 4 hours, for 8, sometimes for 2 days. The animal is faster. That is not relevant because the animal must stop and pant and stand in the shade, and the human does not stop, and eventually the animal cannot cool itself anymore and it stands still and shakes, and the human walks up to it. She let 1 beat pass. Marshal, they do not need to be strong. They do not need to be fast. They need to still be coming, and they are always still coming. Their word for it is jogging. It is a leisure activity. They do it in the morning for fun before work, and their annex lists it under wellness. Duruvan's crest went all the way down. Say that again, he said. For fun, said Ocelot. Not that part, the other part. Ocelot's stalk softened. She had, Thesek thought, some idea of what she was doing to him. "The part where they are always still coming," she said. Duruvan stood there a long moment. 400 kilos of the proudest thing on a world of volcanic glass, and Thesek watched him do arithmetic he had never had to do before, and lose. "That is us," said Duruvan. "That is the thing we are. That is the only thing we are." His voice had gone very level. "That is what my world spent 400,000 years and 11 million dead hatchlings making on a plane of glass under a sun that boils with predators on 3 sides. That is our whole inheritance, Registrar. That is what a Deathworld gets you." He looked up. "And their world just handed it to them in a garden, for free. 2.1. "No," said Ussa from the dark. Everyone turned. The matriarch of the Thren uncoiled a fraction. She was by some distance the oldest thing in the room, and the Thren had a reputation for silence that was in fact not silence at all, but the specific quiet of an ambush lineage that had learned, over 400 million years, that the second best moment to speak is now, and the best one is later. "No," she said again. "Marshal, you have it upside down, and I have been sitting here upside down with you for 3 hours, and I have just this moment turned over." She flowed forward into the light. "The Registrar has been reading us a list of things humans do. And we have been asking why, and she has been answering, and we have not been listening to the answer, because the answer keeps being the same answer, and it is such a stupid answer that our ears refuse it." "Which is?" "There was other food," said Ussa. "Marshal, you said it yourself and then you walked past it. Their world is a garden, 2,000 plants, 400 animals, rain, a moon, free oxygen standing about in the open. Nothing forced them to grate the poison root for 3 days. Nothing forced them to bury the meat for a season, or breed the plant that hurts them, or find the one man who can cut the organ out of the fish, or eat clay, or drink the seed poison at 81 degrees in the 12th hour of a hearing." She stopped in front of the plate of the root and looked at it. "We did what we did because our worlds held a blade to us. Everything we are is a scar. Every single thing at this table is a scar, Warden, and we call the scars an achievement, and we have built a chamber to sit in and admire them." Nobody spoke. "They have no scars," said Ussa. "That is what 2.1 means. Their world never held a blade to them. Their world said, 'Here, take it, it is all yours, there is enough.'" "Then they are soft," said Duruvan, "but there was nothing behind it." "Then why," said Ussa, "did they go and find the root?" Thesek left them arguing and went to the observation gallery, because he had spent 11 cycles chairing this concordance, and had learned that, when he could not make a decision, it was because he did not yet have the fact that the decision was made of. The girl was still there. She had been there, he calculated, for 6 hours. Her tray was closed, her case on the bench beside her. She had her boots off and her feet up, and she was looking out at the 3 suns, and she had a slate on her knee and was not looking at it. Thesek stood in the doorway a while. Then he came in and the deck registered him, and she looked around and did not get up. "Warden," she said. "You know me. Door plates. You said you certify the water. Water, air, and contact surfaces, and food, but there isn't any." She pulled her feet down and made room on the bench, which was a bench designed for a Velshai and could not have held a Karudan if it had been made of the station's spine. Thesek stayed standing. She did not seem to notice she had offered. "It's a boring job. Everything here's going to kill me, so mostly I write that down and then eat out of the case." "You are 17. Nearly 18. You are 17, and you are a certified officer of your delegation. Provisioning officer, 3rd class, field taster, grade 2. Grade 1 takes 20 years, and you have to survive 4 planets. Explain to me why your species sends an adolescent to determine whether things are lethal." She looked at him a second, then laughed, which was a human sound Thesek had read about in the annex and found, in person, deeply alarming, because it was the sound a Carudan made when something was about to break. Sorry, it's a fair question. It's the gut. You have to start young because the whole point of the training is what you keep in there. She tapped her stomach. The flora, the bacteria. It takes about 6 years to build a taster's culture, and it doesn't take properly after about 20. So you start us at 11. I've been eating things on purpose since I was 11. My gran did it. Her mum did it. We've got a mother in a crock at home that's about 140 years old. It came off a boat. A mother. It's a starter. You keep a bit back and it starts the next one, she shrugged. Anyway, that's why you get me and not somebody sensible. My gut's a library. Thesek stood with the 3 sons behind him and tried to arrange the sentence he wanted. Why does your species want to join the Concordance? Oh, I don't know. I'm not diplomatic staff. Guess. Honestly, she thought about it, which he noticed. She did not answer immediately, and she did not answer to please him. I think Idaho wants it because it's a list and we're not on it, and that's annoying. I think Halloran wants the trade rights that come with it. I think most people at home have never heard of you. She glanced up. No offense. None is taken. It is not possible to offend a Carudan. We are load-bearing. He let a vent cycle. Your ambassador argued for 11 hours that your world's index is unfairly measured, that it is a photograph, not a film. Yeah, he's been working on that one. Is it true? No, said the girl. Thesek turned his whole body toward her. I mean, it's a nice argument, but it's not true. Our world's lovely. Have you seen it? There's water just lying about. There's this thing where the light comes through the leaves in the morning and it's green all the way through, and there are birds that sing for no reason. They're not saying anything, they're just showing off. It's a garden. 2.1's about right, honestly. I don't know why he keeps fighting it. Then you should not be here. Probably not, she agreed, and went back to looking at the sons. And Thesek stood there and felt the whole 11-hour hearing come apart in his hands like a badly cured plate, because the applicant's own certified officer had just conceded the case in a gallery with her boots off, and he had never in 11 cycles been so certain that he had lost an argument he was winning. Then explain the root, he said. The what? There is a root on your world. It is full of poison. It is surrounded by other food. Your people spent generations learning to unmake the poison, one step at a time, and the people who found the early steps died of it and never tasted the last one. There was other food, explain it. She blinked at him. It's really good, though. That is not an explanation. It kind of is. She pulled a knee up. Like, okay, you've got a thing and it doesn't want you to have it and it's sitting right there. What are you supposed to do, walk off? Yes, said Thesek. That is what everything does. That is what everything in the surveyed volume does, and it is why the root won for 4 million years, and then you arrived. Huh, said the girl, in the voice of a person who has never once thought about it. They sat, or one of them sat, with the 3 sons. May I tell you something, and you will tell me why it is wrong? Sure. There is a mountain on my world, he said. It is called the Gray Wife. It is 9,000 meters, and it is coated in a lye ice that will take a Carudan's carapace off in 11 minutes. Nobody has ever been up it. There is no reason to go up it. There is nothing on it. It is simply an unresolved fact, standing in the north, and my people have lived in its shadow for 100,000 years, and we look at it, and we do not go because we are not fools, and because Carad has already tried very hard to kill us, and we do not feel the need to help. The girl had gone still, not the still of fear, a different one. You have one of those, said Thesek. It was not a question. He had watched her look up at the frieze for 4 seconds. He had watched her decline to stop chewing. Something in him had already worked it out, and had been waiting 6 hours for the sentence. Yeah, she said. Tell me. There's a mountain, it's the tallest one, not the hardest, that's a different one, but it's the tallest by enough that everyone knows the number. She turned the slate over in her hands. And it's not good up there. There's a third of the air, it's 40 under. The wind takes the top off you. There's a part where your body just starts dying and there's nothing you can do about it. It's not a metaphor, you're just going and the only cure is going down. And there's nothing at the top. No gold. No plant that grows there. Nothing to eat, nothing to build, nothing to take. It's a rock with less air on it. And there's a queue, said the girl. Thesek said nothing. Like an actual queue on the last bit. Hundreds of people a year and you can see the photos. Everybody's in a line on a ridge waiting their turn in the death zone. She laughed a little apologetically, as if it were an embarrassing relative. People sell everything to go. People go back after it takes their fingers. My grand's cousin went twice. The second time he was 61. And a lot of them don't come down and everybody knows that going up and there's still a queue. Why? For the view, said the girl. That is not an answer. No, I know, she shrugged, helpless, honest. It's not a good answer, I've never heard a good one. People say it's because it's there, and that's not a reason either. That's just a thing people say when they haven't got one. She looked out at the suns. I think it's because the mountain doesn't care. That's the bit I keep coming back to. It's not hunting anybody. It's not angry. It's not doing anything at all. It's just sat there being 9 kilometers of not caring. And it will kill you exactly as much whether you're a good person or a bad one or the best climber alive or somebody's dad. It's completely indifferent. And I think that's the whole thing, actually. I think there's a kind of person who cannot stand a thing being indifferent to them, she thought. And it turns out there's a queue of them. Warden Thesek Varrasan of Karad stood in an observation gallery on a station built at the intersection of 3 suns that did not like each other, and felt his entire life reorganize itself. Because it was all one thing. The root that did not want to be eaten. The seed that made a poison so that nothing would take it, cultivated on 4 continents. The mold in the cave, given a name and a family. The fish that keeps a lethal organ and keeps a queue. The animal that runs faster and is followed anyway at a walk for 2 days by something that is always still coming. The mountain that does not care, and the line of people on the ridge waiting their turn to be not cared about at 9,000 meters. Every species in that chamber was an answer to a question its world had asked. That was what a scar is. Karad had said, I will strip you, and the Karudin had grown plate. Kesh had said, you will starve, and the Kesh had grown an 11-hour promise. The Thren had been asked to wait and had waited for 400 million years. They were all replies, every one of them, beautiful, hard-earned, and entirely reactive. Nobody had asked humans anything. Their world had opened its hands and said, here, there is enough, be still. And they had looked around at the most generous surface in the surveyed volume and gone straight to the parts that were trying to kill them. The ice, the deep, the dry, the high, the poison root, the pain seed, the rotting jar, the mountain with the queue. They had found their garden's few small hells and moved into them on purpose for the view, and then they had come out here, 400 light years, to a station at a null point, to complain that they were not on a list. Warden, said the girl, you've gone a bit. Be quiet, please, said Thesek. I am having a thought and I am not built for speed. She was quiet. Officer Calloway, he said at last. Wren's fine. Officer Calloway, in 4 hours this concordance will reconvene and I will read out a rejection which is correct, which is arithmetically unimpeachable, and which is the stupidest document I have ever put my seal to. He turned. I am going to do something else instead. I am going to need you in the chamber. I'm not delegation staff, I can't. You are a certified officer of the applicant party with a competency in the determination of edibility. Thesek was already moving. That is the only qualification that has ever mattered, and it has taken us 900 years to notice. Bring the case. The chamber reconvened at the 18th hour, and there was a table in it. It was a plain slab of the founder's black stone, and it had lived in a sealed room off the archive for 900 years, and Vesith had needed 2 hours and a warden's override to find anyone who knew where the key was. Around it stood 6 settings, and the settings were not for a species, they were for a world. Ambassador Bassi came in and saw the table and stopped dead. Halloran walked into his back. "Warden, what is this?" "This is the test of the table," said Thesek. Underclerk read the clause. Vesith read it in the flat voice of a preen who wished very much to be somewhere else. Founder's instrument, first article, second clause. A people belongs to this concordance when they can sit at the founder's table and take the meal. That is all of it. That is all of it, Warden. There is a note in the margin in Founder Gall's own hand. It says, "Nobody has ever taken more than one." "Explain the settings," said Thesek. Ossilik rose on her lattice, and her voice, Thesek noticed, had a tremor in it that 240 years of cataloging had never put there. 6 founders, 6 worlds. At the founding they could not share air or water or food. Every one of these 6 dishes is the staple of a world that killed most of its children, and every one is fatal, or inert, or unbearable to 5 of the 6 present. So the founders made a rite of it. Each came to the table and took their own dish, and looked at the other 5 and declined honorably, and that was the whole ceremony. It is a rite of refusal. It says, "We cannot eat together, and we have come anyway, and that is what we have instead of a family." She indicated the settings one at a time. Karad hern cake, lichen and mineral pressed, velshai, sushara a living culture served at temperature, kesh, ver a pod raw whole thrin, nesh root raw cut, moss fat a pressure-cured lipid raw as it comes out of the tank. She stopped at the 6th. Gall. There has been no gall for 900 years. The dish is prepared from preserved stock because we do not take people off the list. The chamber waited. "Warden," said Duruvan carefully, "this is a right of refusal. It cannot be passed. That is the point of it. It was designed so that nobody could pass it." "Yes," said Thesek. "Then what are you doing?" Warden Thesek Varasan of Karad looked across the chamber at a 17-year-old in a coverall 2 sizes too large, holding a case, standing under a frieze of 6 figures, one of whom was absent. "I am asking," he said, "the only question this concordance has ever had. And I have decided to ask it of somebody who might answer." The girl came down the steps. She set the case on the floor beside the table. She looked at the 6 dishes for a long moment, one after another, left to right, and her face did something that Thesek would spend the rest of his life failing to describe to people who had not been in the room. It was not fear, it was not bravado, it was the face of a professional arriving at work. "Okay," said Ren Calloway, "what's in them?" Ambassador Bassi found his voice. "Warden, with respect, she is 17 and she is not authorized to." "I'm authorized," said Ren without turning around. I'm the only person on this station who is. It's the whole job." "Ren, nobody's making me eat anything." "Warden, is anybody making me eat anything?" "No," said Thesek. "Then I'd like to work, please, because everyone here has spent 11 hours arguing about whether we're hard enough for your club, and not one of you has asked me a question I know the answer to." Ossilik came down off her lattice. "I will describe them. Ask me anything. I will not lie and I will not omit." Ren started on the left, that one. Karad hern cake, a pressed lichen grown on rock in the high valleys, polysaccharide, silicate grit, and a suite of heavy metals the lichen concentrates out of the substrate. The metals are not a contaminant. They are the point. Carudan carapace is built from them. Ren leaned over it without touching it, the way a person looks at a road before crossing. "How heavy?" "Iron and zinc heavy, or the bad end." Ossilik's stalks froze. "The bad end." "Yeah, then no. Sorry, Warden, that's yours, isn't it? But metal doesn't leave. That's the thing about metals, it's not that it'd hurt, it's that it'd stay. There's no cooking it out, no fermenting it out, no waiting it out. It just sits in you and never stops sitting in you. I've got no move for that. She moved on. Next. Duruvan's crest twitched, and Thesek understood exactly why. She had refused the warden's own dish, to his face, in his chamber, in 9 seconds, correctly, with an apology so casual it barely qualified. Velshai Sushara, a living fungal culture, nutritionally complete for me, and it contains no toxin whatsoever. Nothing in it would poison a human. I want that said clearly. Ren crouched, put her face close to the bowl, and sniffed. She sat back on her heels and looked up at the Registrar of Bodies. It's mirrored, she said. Ocelik did not move for 4 full seconds. Say that again. It's mirrored. The molecules are the wrong way round. Left-handed where we're right-handed, or the other way, I can never remember which of us is which, she shrugged. You can sort of smell it, not the handedness, obviously that's mad. It's that it doesn't smell of anything I've got a slot for. Everything's got a slot. Even the stuff that'll kill me has a slot, that's just got nothing. She stood. It wouldn't poison me, it'd go through me like gravel. I'd starve with a full stomach and be really confused the whole time. So no, thanks though. Warden, said Ocelik, and her voice had come apart. She has a word for it. 11 species in the surveyed volume have a word for chirality, and 9 of them got it from a laboratory, and she used it in a corridor voice while crouching. It means it happened to them. Somewhere in their history, a human starved with a full stomach and somebody watched and worked it out and told the next one. And by the time you get a 17-year-old who says it's mirrored while sniffing, that is not knowledge. That is a nursery rhyme. They have been to the bottom of that and come back up and made it boring. Ren had already walked past the 3rd and 4th settings to the end of the table, and Thesek realized she had done it deliberately, and that she had noticed the empty carving 6 hours before any of them had noticed her. That's the one for the people who aren't here. Galv, said Ocelik. Yes. What happened to them? Their son. Oh, she looked at the small gray paste on its stone plate, 900 years old, made from preserved stock. What's in it? A neurotoxin, a true one, not a defense, not a byproduct. It was the animal's own signaling chemistry, and the gall metabolized it as fuel. There is no preparation known. Heat does not touch it. Acid does not touch it. Fermentation concentrates it. No counter, no clay will bind it. No waiting improves it. If you put that in your mouth, you will be dead inside a minute. Ren nodded slowly. Then no, that one's just no, that's not a puzzle, that's a wall. She was quiet a moment. Were they nice, the gall? Nobody had asked that in 900 years. I do not know, said Ocelik. Nobody wrote it down. We wrote down what they were made of. That's a shame, said Ren, and moved on. She stopped at the UB setting, and Delegate Palm's tank went very still. Moss fat, a pressure-cured lipid slab grown at 900 atmospheres. Inert. No toxin, no metal, no mirror. Fat, water, a little protein. Chemically compatible with you in every respect. So I can eat it. Chemically. Yes. It was a pale, sweating, faintly translucent slab, and it sat on the plate the way something sits when it has never been alive and never been dead. Halloran made a small sound from the gallery. It smells like a drain, said Ren. Yes. It looks like something you'd find under a boat. Yes. Nobody's ever eaten it, have they? Nobody who isn't UB. Palm's tank bubbled. The translator said, in 400 years no non-UB has put UB food in their mouth. 2 tried, both stopped. It is not poison, it is simply unbearable. We have stopped offering. Right, said Ren. Warden, can I have a flame? The chamber did not react, because the chamber did not understand what she had said. A what, said Thesek. A flame, or a hot surface, I'm not fussy. 600 degrees would be lovely. She was already unclipping her case. And I've got salt, but only the fine stuff. Doesn't matter. Vesith, who was a preen and therefore the only person present who processed a request as a request, went and got a bench torch from the maintenance locker. It took 4 minutes. She cut the moss fat into strips and ran the flame over them, and the fat began to render, seeping and hissing and pulling away from itself, and the water boiled off, and the smell in the chamber changed twice, first to something much worse, then, abruptly, to something else entirely. The strips went pale to gold to dark crackling brown, and she turned them with her knife tip, frowning slightly, humming. Then she killed the torch, salted them, waited 30 seconds and ate one. She chewed. She stopped. She looked at the ceiling the way a person does when they have found something. "Oh," she said, "that's crackling, that's just crackling. Delegate Palm, mate, have you got any idea how good this is? Why is nobody eating this?" Delegate Palm of the whose species could not survive in open air, whose food no other person in the surveyed volume had ever consented to touch, whose entire representation in the Concordance for 400 years had consisted of being pumped into a pit and asking one question about pressure, said nothing at all. His tank bubbled continuously for 11 seconds, which the translator declined to render. "She burned it," said Duruvan. He sounded like a man at the edge of something. "She rendered it," said Ocelot. "Marshal, she took an inert slab nobody in 400 years could swallow, applied heat, and the heat broke the long chains and drove off the water and caramelized the residue, and it became food. Nothing changed except that she cooked it. The obstacle was never chemistry. The obstacle is that nobody in this concordance owns a stomach they can carry around outside their body and point at things." Ren was already at the 4th setting. "Thren, nesh root raw, matriarch, do you wish to describe it?" "No," said Asa, "you do it, she will believe you." Nesh root grows in the mud flats of the Thren coast. It contains a glycoside which, on contact with the enzymes in your saliva, converts to a compound that will destroy your kidneys over about 6 days. It is not survivable and it is not immediate. Heat does not remove it, heat sets it. Acid does not remove it. The Thren cure it with their own venom for a season, and no other species has venom that does the job. Ren picked the root up. Bassie stood out of his seat. She turned it over, scratched the cut face with her thumbnail, looked at what came off, smelled her thumb. She put the root back down exactly where it had been, squarely, and stood with her hands on her hips and stared at it for a very long time. The chamber waited, even the Kesh waited. 6 days, she said. 6 days. And heat sets it. Heat sets it. And it's a glycoside, so it's bound to a sugar, that's what that means. There's a poison bit and a sugar bit and they're holding hands. Ocelot did not answer at once. "Yes." "Right," Ren nodded slowly. "Then I can't eat that today." Bassie sat back down. "Thank you," said Ocelot, and the relief in her voice was genuine and undignified. "That is correct. You are the first." "No, hang on, I'm not finished." Ren held up a hand. "I said today." Ocelot stopped. "Can I have a jar?" said Ren. The silence that followed was, Thesek would say later, the most complete of his professional life. "A what?" said Ocelot. "A jar. And a lot more salt than I've got, so proper salt and clean water and somewhere warm and dark. Cupboard's fine. It doesn't have to be a good cupboard." She was counting on her fingers now, talking to herself as much as to anyone. "Because it's a glycoside and it's holding hands with a sugar, and there are about 900 things in my grand's crock that will eat a sugar. That's all they do. That's their entire job. They don't care what the sugar is holding hands with, they'll go in and take it and leave the rest behind, and the rest is small and water-soluble, and then you pour the brine off. And they do it slowly, which is the point. Heat is fast and fast sets it. Rot is slow and slow just undoes it." She looked up. "Give me 6 weeks." 6 weeks, said Ocelot. 6 weeks is a guess. Gran would know to the day. She'd want to know how salty the mud is where it grows and how warm the coast gets, because you're basically trying to be the coast. Ren scratched her neck. "It might not work. I'd test a strip first, I'm not an idiot. And I can't do it in this room in front of you, and I know that's rubbish for your ceremony, and I'm sorry. But it's not a no. It's just not a today. Officer Calloway, said Thesek. You are asking this concordance for an extension. I'm asking for a cupboard. Matriarch Ussa of the Thren came down off her ledge the way the Thren did everything, which was that at one moment she was up there, and at the next she was on the chamber floor directly in front of the human girl, 400 million years of ambush lineage, venom sacs full, silent, and Wren Calloway looked down at her and said, "Oh, hi," and did not step back. Child, said Ussa. Wren, my people are patient. It is the only thing we are. We do not chase and we do not fight. We choose a place and become part of it and wait. And when a Thren says she has waited, she means it in a way no Kesh will ever mean it. I have personally waited 9 days for a meal. My grandmother waited a season. It is our entire inheritance, and we do not speak of it, because speaking of it would be vulgar. She came a fraction closer. You have just looked at a poison that has beaten my species for 400 million years. Beaten us, child. We do not eat the nesh root. We cure it with our own bodies because we cannot beat it any other way, and you said, not today. Well, yeah, it's only 6 weeks. You said it the way a person says they will do a thing on Thursday. It's kind of a Thursday thing. Ussa looked at her a long moment. Warden, I withdraw all my objections, strike them from the record. I have waited 9 days for a meal and called it patience, and this child has booked a poison in for a Thursday. She turned back. You will have your jar. You will have my salt from my own coast, and you will have it because I intend to be alive when the 6 weeks are over. Which left one? Wren came back down the table and stopped in front of the third setting, and the Grand Marshal of Kesh came off his slab and crossed the floor. And this time the crest was not up and the teeth were not out, and Thesek understood that this was worse. Ver, said Duruvan. Marshal, I will describe it, said Ossilik. No, this one is mine. The pod was the size of a fist, black, with a dull matte skin like something that had been left in a fire and had decided to survive. It grows on the glass. It is the only plant on the glass plains. It has no competition and no predators, and it is not defended by thorn or shell or poison. It is defended by pain. He said the word with no particular weight, which was somehow much worse. Inside is a compound that does nothing to a body. It does not burn tissue. It does not damage a cell. It does not kill. It seizes the nerve that reports heat and injury and holds it down and will not let go, and your body screams for a very long time about a fire that is not there. It is a lie told directly into the nerve. Okay, said Wren. Akesh eats one ver. Once. At the passage into adulthood we go out onto the glass and find one and eat it and do not scream, and afterwards we are adults and we never eat another as long as we live. I ate one. I was 11. It took 40 minutes and there has not been a day in 90 years I have not thought about it. He looked up and his eyes were wet, which Thesek had never seen and would never mention. Girl, that is not food. That is the hardest thing my world ever made, and we eat it once to prove we can and then leave it alone forever. That pod is the reason my species has a seat at this table. Wren picked it up. Is it going to hurt me? Actually hurt, damage? No, said Ossilik quietly. That is the diabolical part. It is entirely a lie. There will be no injury of any kind. Your body will be perfectly fine, and it will be telling you at maximum volume that it is not. Right, said Wren. She bit into it. It took, by the chamber record, 19 minutes. Thesek watched all of it, because he had asked for it, and somewhere around the 4th minute he decided he would not look away, and he kept that. First she went very still. Then her eyes changed. Then, at about 90 seconds, the sweating started the whole surface of her at once. The millions of glands the annex had listed under thermoregulation doing the only thing they knew how to do, and Ossilik made a small anguished noise, because she alone understood what she was seeing. A body that had spent 2 million years learning to shed heat while it kept going, responding to a lie about fire by preparing, faithfully, uselessly, to keep going. Her face went red, her hands shook, her nose ran and her eyes streamed, and she made a sound in her throat like a door. She did not stop chewing. At the 5th minute, Bassie stood and said her name, and she raised one hand, palm out, without looking at him, and he sat down, and the ambassador of Sol 3 put his face in his hands. At the 9th minute she swallowed the first mouthful. At the 11th she took the second bite. Duruvan Keshtor stood 2 meters away with his crest flat against his skull, and did not move for 19 minutes. She finished it, all of it, down to the stem. She put the stem on the plate and sat down on the floor of the chamber of the Concordance of Severe Origins with her back against the founder's table, streaming and shaking and crimson, and breathed in and out for a minute and a half, with her hands loose on her knees. Nobody spoke. Nobody in that chamber was capable of speech. Then Wren Calloway wiped her face on her sleeve, looked up at the Grand Marshal of Kesh through eyes that could barely open, and said, in a voice sandpapered down to almost nothing, "Can I have the seed?" Duruvan did not move. "Sorry, the seeds. There's got to be seeds in there, I felt them." She coughed and laughed and coughed. "Because that's incredible. Marshal, that's genuinely incredible. It's not just the heat, there's something underneath it. It's smoky. It's smoky, and it's a bit sweet at the back, and my mum's family would lose their minds. That would go on eggs. That would be a sauce. Oh, you could put that in a chocolate. That would be unbelievable in a chocolate." Nobody breathed. "And does it get hotter?" said Wren, hoarse and glowing and entirely serious. "If the plant's stressed, ours do. Ours make more of the stuff when they're thirsty, so if you want a hot one you just don't water it. Does yours? Because if yours does and the glass is dry, then the ones out in the middle would be the—" She stopped. "Sorry, I'm doing the thing. I do this." "Do the thing," said Ussa softly. "You'd cross them," said Wren. "Take the hottest ones and cross them, then take the hottest of those, and after about 15 years you'd have one that's 4 times this, and then some idiot would breed one that's 40 times, because there's always some idiot, and then there'd be a competition." She rubbed her eyes. "There's always a competition. There's a whole thing at home with the peppers. People have been going for the record about 30 years. It's completely out of hand. They've made ones you literally cannot eat, and people eat them on camera." "Why?" said Duruvan. It came out of him like a stone. "Dunno, it's fun," she shrugged. "Sorry, was that rude? Is that your ordeal? Have I done something?" "Warden," said Duruvan. He did not take his eyes off the girl on the floor. "It is not the eating. I could have borne the eating. If she had eaten it and stood up and said, 'I am as strong as a Kesh,' I would have gone back to my slab and been angry for a year, and it would have been fine, because that is a contest, and a contest has 2 people in it and one of them wins." His crest was completely flat. "She asked for the seed." "Yes," said Thesek. "She is not competing with us." Duruvan's voice cracked, which no Kesh voice had ever done in that chamber. "She sat on the floor of this room with her body screaming at her about a fire that is not there, and while it was still screaming she was already thinking about the second one, about the harvest, about the 15 years and the crossing and the one that is 4 times. She is not trying to beat the Warden. She is not trying to survive it. She wants to take it home and improve it and put it on eggs." Warden Thesek Varasan of Karad stood up. "Yes, now sit down, Marshal. I am going to say the thing, and I will only be able to say it once." He came around to the head of the table, under the frieze, over 6 dishes from 6 worlds, 3 refused, 1 rendered, 1 booked for a Thursday, 1 gone down to the stem. For 900 years this concordance has asked the wrong question, and we have asked it so beautifully that nobody noticed. We ask, "What did your world do to you?" And every species who has sat in these seats has answered proudly, and the answer is always a scar, and we have hung the scars on the wall and called it a charter. We are specialists, all of us. That is what a death world makes. Your world holds a blade to you and you become the one answer to the one blade, plate, or venom, or speed, or patience. And your gut narrows to three things and then two, and you eat facing a wall alone, because there is nothing in the universe you can share a table with. We call that strength. Registrar, what is it? Ossilic's stalks were all the way down. It is a lock, she said. It fits one key. It is a lock. Now what is a predator? Come, Marshall, you are the apex predator of a world of glass. What is a predator? Teeth, said Duruvan, and then after a moment, no. No, say it properly. Duruvan looked at the girl on the floor for a long moment. A predator, he said slowly, is a thing that turns the world into itself. Yes, Thessex Vence cycled. That is all it is. Not teeth, not claws, not speed. It is aperture. It is the width of the door through which the universe can be brought inside and made into more of you. Marshall, your aperture is one animal wide. Mine is 3. The matriarch's is 4, and one of them makes her sick. We are the deadliest species in the surveyed volume, and every one of us is standing in front of a door we can barely get through sideways. 75,000, that is their door. 4 kingdoms on a bench with her boots off. And when the door is too narrow, when the thing will not fit, they do not walk away, which is what every organism in the history of life has done. They widen the door, with fire, with salt, with time, with a mold that has a family name. With 7 steps that took 100 lifetimes and killed everyone who found step 4, with a jar in a cupboard, with their grandmother, who knows it to the day. He turned to the human delegation. Ambassador Bassi, you argued for 11 hours that our index measured your world unfairly. You were wrong, and you were wrong in the most useful way anyone has ever been wrong in this chamber. Your index is correct. 2.1. It is not a death world. It is a garden. It has water lying about in the open and birds that sing for no reason and light that comes green through the leaves in the morning. And I have never seen it. And I am now told I will die not having seen it, and I find that I mind. And that is precisely the problem. Your world never held a blade to you. Nothing made you do this. There was other food. There was always other food, and you went and found the root anyway. You went to the ice and the dry and the deep and the high. You found the seed that makes a poison so that nothing would eat it, and you planted it on 4 continents and bred it stronger, and you feed it to your children on a Tuesday. You found a mountain that does not want you, that has nothing on it, that has never wanted anything and never will, and you formed a queue. He looked around the chamber at 400 million years of scars. We are what deathworlds make, he said. They are the thing that goes to deathworlds on purpose, for the view, and then stays and works out what grows there and sends the recipe home. Colleagues, we have been debating whether to let them join us. We have not been paying attention. They were never applying to join us. Thesek looked at a 17-year-old girl sitting on the floor with her face streaming and a stem on a plate beside her. They are applying to move in next door, and they have brought something. The finding of the Concordance of Severe Origins, entered at the 22nd hour, ran to 4 lines, which Vesith read out twice because the first time nobody believed her. The hazard index of origin for Sol 3 was confirmed at 2.1. The appeal was denied. Sol 3 did not qualify for admission and would not qualify at any future date, on the grounds that Earth was, by every measure the concordance possessed, a garden. And then the 4th line, which Thesek had written by hand in the margin of the founder's instrument, beside where founder Gall had once written nobody has ever taken more than 1. That this concordance, having existed 900 years to record what worlds do to peoples, does hereby open a second register, to record what peoples do to worlds. That entry 1 is Sol 3. That the register is, at present, 1 entry long, and the warden does not expect this to remain true. Ambassador Idawu Bassi stood in the well holding 1,100 pages of argument and looked, for the first time in the entire proceeding, completely lost. Warden, am I to understand that we've been rejected? Comprehensively. And also admitted to something else. Yes. Which is what exactly? I have no idea, said Thesek. I invented it 40 minutes ago. Ask me in a century. Bassi turned slowly and looked at his provisioning officer, third class, who was being helped up off the floor by the Grand Marshal of Kesh. An event the record does not describe, because Veseth's hands were shaking too badly to write. Ren, what just happened? Ren Calloway wiped her face on her sleeve and looked around the chamber, at the 6 settings and the freeze and the 400 kilos of apex predator holding her elbow, and shrugged. Dunno. So are we in? You were never outside, said Thesek. You were being polite. The jar went into a cupboard in the archive annex, 3rd shelf, in a room that was warm and dark because nobody had bothered to run climate to it in 2 centuries. It was a plain jar. Inside it was Thrennesh root, cut into fingers, under a brine made with salt from the matriarch's own coast, weighted with a clean stone from the Hull shop, with a splash of something cloudy from a 140-year-old crock that had come off a boat. Ren had labeled it in human handwriting with a marker, a date 6 weeks out, and under the date 3 words. Veseth translated the 3 words for the warden, and then had to translate them again, because Thesek did not accept it the first time. It said, "Don't move it." Thesek came down to look at it more often than he told anyone. Duruvan came too, which they both pretended not to notice. Once, in the 4th week, Thesek arrived to find the Grand Marshal of Kesh standing in a dark cupboard at 3 in the morning, staring at a jar, and neither of them said a word about it, then or ever. Ren came back on the day. Not near the day. On it. Her ship burned 4 days of margin to make it, and she walked into the archive annex and lifted the jar out and held it to the light and turned it and made a small sound of approval and said, "Yeah, that's it, that's exactly it. Gran said it'd be cloudy." Then she opened it. The Concordance of Severe Origins had, without any of them admitting it, arranged to be present. Thesek was there. Duruvan was there. Ussa was coiled on a shelf. Oslik had 3 stalks out. Palm was in a portable tank, having personally overridden 2 safety protocols to be in that corridor. Ren tested a strip on a reader first, because she was not an idiot. Then she waited 11 minutes, which were the longest 11 minutes of Warden Thesek Varasan's professional life, and read the result and said, "Oh, nice," and ate a piece of Thrennesh root off the tip of her knife in the archive annex of a station at a null point between 3 suns. She chewed, she considered. "It's a bit like a gherkin," she said. "Is it food?" said Ussa. She had not moved. She had not blinked. 400 million years of ambush lineage stood in a corridor waiting on the opinion of a girl who had just turned 18. "Matriarch, it's really good. It's sour and a bit funky, and it'd be amazing with something fatty. It'd be amazing with delegate palm stuff, actually. Oh, that's a sandwich. That's genuinely a sandwich." And then she did the thing. She turned around with the jar in one hand and held it out to the chamber, to a Karudin and a Kesh, and a Thren, and a Velshai, and an Ub in a tank. 5 apex survivors of 5 worlds that had each spent 400 million years teaching their children never, ever to put a stranger's food in their mouth, and said, "Do you want some?" They could not, of course. Not one of them. The mirror, the metal, the narrow doors. Ussa's own coastal salt was in that brine, and Ussa would have died of what it was now holding. Thesek looked at the jar held out at the end of a human arm and understood with total clarity that she knew this, that she had certified the water on this station for 6 weeks and could recite exactly what each of them could and could not take, and that she was offering anyway. "No," said Thesek, "thank you." "Fair enough," said Ren, and put the lid back on and smiled at him, and said the last thing, the thing he would carry for the rest of his long armored life, in the same voice she had used to offer a piece of pork to a predator 4 times her mass, with no weight on it at all, because she meant nothing by it, because she was 18 and it was a Thursday and she was already thinking about the sandwich. Next time, then. And Warden Thesek Var Rasan of Karad, who had chaired the hardest species in the surveyed volume for 11 cycles and had come down that morning to watch a jar, finally understood how it happens, not with a fleet and not with a fire, and not with anything a concordance would ever think to write a clause about, but exactly like this. With a plate held out and an offer that is never once withdrawn, patiently, generation after generation, for 10,000 years, by a species that has all the time in the world, that does not mind being refused, that is not in a hurry, that is not angry, and that is always, always still coming.